Greetings everyone and welcome back to another STOCAST. Today I want to talk about the death of the dilithium exchange. And if you have been, or if you don't, well, first of all, what's going on? If you don't know what's going on, you've been living under a rock, not looking at any social media for Star Trek Online. Basically, the dilithium exchange has reached a point where we've hit the maximum cap for how much you can charge for dilithium. So when you post your Zen on the dilithium exchange in order to buy dilithium, you can set a price, how much you want to get for each Zen. And there's a maximum price of 500 to 1. So 500 dilithium for 1 Zen, and it cannot go above that. So if you're trying to sell your Zen and you want to get more than 500 dilithium per Zen, you cannot do that. That's the maximum price you can have, and we've reached that point. And as a result, no one is posting Zen on the dilithium exchange anymore. So if you go there to try and buy some Zen, you will find that there is none available. And a lot of people are panicking about this. And I think a lot of you probably, the people who watch these STOCASTs or listen to these STOCASTs are probably more of my core audience, the most dedicated viewers. And you probably already know what my opinion is on all this. If you've been a long-time viewer of my channel, you'll know that I was never a big fan of the dilithium exchange in the first place. And I could sit here on my high horse and say, I told you so. But the reality is, this development only hurts people. It doesn't help anyone. So me being an asshole about it isn't really a good thing. So let's go ahead and talk about it. I do have a couple of suggestions for how they could fix it. Everyone has suggestions. Everyone and their dog, including this airplane. Hello, Mr. Airplane. How are you doing today? What's your suggestion? Fly Delta? Fly Delta. I don't think that's going to help. Anyway, so I do have a couple of suggestions. I'm going to put those at the end, though, because I don't think Cryptic listens to me. And even if they did, they're not going to take my advice. Actually, I did email Ambassador Kale. There was a whole hubbubaloo on Twitter where people were accusing him of playing favorites, and he said, well, if you're a content creator and you want giveaway codes for your content, all you have to do is contact me. And someone said, well, how do you contact me? And he gave out an email address, so I emailed him and I said, listen, I'm going to say a lot of positive things about the new Genesis bundle. I really like it. I think it's really great, which is all true, by the way. I wasn't blowing smoke up his ass. I really do believe all that. I really do think highly of the new Genesis bundle, and I said I would appreciate it if you could give me a giveaway code so I can give a prize out to my viewers, and he never responded. I've contacted him on Twitter before, and he didn't respond to that either, so I mean, I don't know if he just didn't see it both times. It's probably a blessing in disguise, though, because if the people at Cryptic really sat down and went through my videos and watched my content, I'd probably get a cease and desist letter in the mail. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. So let's go back to talk about the dilithium exchange. Anyway, so I have been telling people for a long time, well over a year, that free-to-play players should not rely on the Dilex. And I said, I can't remember the first time I said it. I went and tried to look through some of my old videos to see, and I couldn't find it. But I remember over a year ago telling people, don't depend on the Dilex because you're taking it for granted, because that Zen that gets posted on there had to be paid for in real money by another player. Cryptic is not putting that Zen on the exchange. Other players are. And I said, don't count on that because someday you may wake up and find that it's gone. And here we are. And people, a few people, not everyone, but a couple of people mocked me at the time. And they just sort of shrugged that off and be like, oh, that's crazy. And if you look around, even recently, if you look on Reddit, you look on these places, any place where you can find people talking about Star Trek Online, the advice that's always given every time is, you know, it's a free player and it's like, oh, I want to get a tier 6 ship. How can you help me how can I get a tier 6 ship? And of course you see some good advice like, well, wait for the events. There's 3 events a year and all that stuff. That's all good advice. And then it's always farm dilithium and sell it on the exchange. Farm dilithium, sell it on the exchange. That's the refrain over and over and over again. Never any mention of how it works. Never any mention of the fact that you're buying it from other real players. Never any mention of any of that. it's just assumed and taken for granted for years now that the dilithium exchange will always be there and that there will always be Zen for you to buy. And I feel like a disaster. I feel like a guy who's been warning the village about the volcano that's going to explode, and no one took me seriously, and now the volcano exploded, and everyone's shrugging their heads and said, gee, who could have seen this coming? You all know what my philosophy is. I've espoused it quite a few times, both in STOCAST form and on other videos. My free-to-play 100K, that whole series. My belief is if you want dilithium, farm dilithium. That's why I have a dill farming video on this channel. Feel free to go watch it. Leave a like and subscribe. But no, seriously. The reason why I farm dilithium is because I need dilithium to buy things that cost dilithium. So when I find myself needing dilithium to upgrade my gear or to get new hanger pets or whatever, I farm the dilithium. And when I find myself wanting to buy things that cost Zen, like this new Genesis bundle, for example, I pull out my credit card and I go to the ARC website and I pay the money. And I just think that that's the best way to do things. And you might say, so for me, this whole thing doesn't affect me at all, because I was never really someone who used the dilithium exchange ever. I use it very sparingly, and I only use it as sort of a mild supplement, right? Let's say I have 2,700 Zen. I need to buy a Starship from the C-Store in order to do a review. Well, I could either spend $10 to get 1,000 Zen, because that's the lowest amount you can buy on the website, or I could just sell a little bit of dilithium to make up the difference. Or on my free-to-play account, I needed 500 Zen in order to unlock my EC cap, so I sold some dilithium in order to get it. Those are the sorts of things I think the dilithium exchange was good for. What I never approved of, ever, was the idea of farming dilithium on 50 characters a day over and over and over again in order to get huge, massive amounts of Zen. For me, the dilithium exchange was some place you went to get 50 Zen. Or 200 Zen, not 2,000 or 20,000. So maybe some of you did that and you're offended right now, and I don't mean to offend you. I'm not trying to say that you were wrong for doing that. All I'm saying is, that was never going to last forever, right? I'm glad that you got your Zen. I'm glad if you were the kind of person who sold dilithium and you were able to buy the legendary bundle with it or whatever, that's great. I'm glad that it worked for you and you were able to get your stuff. But as a larger issue for the community, I think this is a wake-up call to stop taking that for granted. And Kale put out a post, and there's been some talk on Twitter and stuff, and Al Rivera made a post about how they're working on ways to fix it, but let's get real here. Does anyone think they're actually going to fix this? Of course not. It's been pointed out over and over again that over at Neverwinter, they increased their cap to 750, and it has still been a problem for years, and you have to wait months in order to get their Zen over there with their Astral Diamonds or whatever it is, because I never played the game. I mean, they might do something, right? They might add something to the Phoenix box or whatever. And maybe it'll make a small change, and maybe it'll go back down to like 450 for a while, but it's just going to happen again. Because they're never going to make any structural changes that really force the issue. And the community isn't going to learn its lesson, and you're still going to have people selling massive amounts of dilithium in order to get their Zen. And so you say, okay, well, what's the two things we can do to address this? Well, the first thing is I'm going to restate my feeling on this, which is that if you're a free-to-play player, you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, what do I do then? Do I just have to quit now? And I would say, well, you don't need Zen to enjoy the game. And I've tried to prove that over and over and over again. On my free-to-play account, farmed the bare minimum Zen in order to get an account bank and an EC cap raise. That's it. And that account is doing very well. That account parses like 250K. That account has multiple good ships. That account has all epic gear. That account is doing very well. And you can have lots of fun and have a huge selection of fleet ships and do very well in the game without having Zen. Zen just isn't required to play the game or to have fun playing the game. So if you're a free-to-play player who feels like it's hopeless now, all I would say is just change your perspective, right? Look at the game differently. Try to find ways to have fun and get get things that you want that aren't Zen-based. Stop chasing the Zen dragon. Stop thinking that everything good about the game comes from the Zen store, because it doesn't. And if all you care about are things that come from the Zen store and you're not willing to spend any real money on the game, then yes, I do think you should quit. And I don't mean that in a mean way, like, oh, just get out, you know, you dirty freeloader or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if the only enjoyment you can get out of the game comes from things that cost real money, and you cannot or will not spend real money to get it, then there's nothing of value here for you. But if that's not the case, and I think I think this game has a lot to offer outside of Zen purchases and outside of the Zen store, then I would say focus on the things you can get without Zen and change your mindset, change your perspective, okay? But now let's get to the part of the video that many people are probably waiting for, and I'll try to do time codes this time in this one. So maybe you've skipped straight here, in which case, hello. What are my suggestions? There's a lot of suggestions out there already. There's a lot of good ones. I don't want to reiterate suggestions that people have already made, but let's talk about some novel suggestions, or at least suggestions that I haven't heard from anyone else. The first one would be to make it so that the event buyouts, all of the event buyouts, can be purchased with dilithium. So the summer event, the winter event, the anniversary event, all these little events they have throughout the year, right? They've gone event crazy. Because one of the things about dill sinks is that they have to be recurring. If you put a dill sink into the game where you're able to get something for dilithium, but you really only need to get it once, or you really only need to get it a few times, then what's going to happen is it'll have an immediate effect. You'll get a sugar high where people are spending dilithium to get it, but then as soon as they have it, the incentive is gone, and then things just go back to normal. So you need some kind of an incentive that is recurring, that happens over and over and over again. So if you make all of the event buyouts in dilithium rather than Zen or Lobi crystals, then that's going to be something that happens over and over again, and people are going to be incentivized to do it over and over again. And Cryptic's still going to get their money, because the problem with some of the suggestions you see out there is that they would cost Cryptic too much money. Like it would like people are saying, oh, sell lockbox keys for dilithium. Well, they're never going to do that, right? Because then people wouldn't have to spend Zen in order to get it. And it's true that people could just farm dilithium in order to buy out the events. That's true. And people will do that. But for some people, they won't. So if you're the kind of person who's buying out an event, because here's the thing, you have to line up motives. You have to get your motives sorted out. Who's the kind of player who buys out an event? Is it the kind of player who has all day to sit and farm dilithium? Or is it the kind of player who's busy and works all day and only has a few hours to play here or there? Well, it's going to be the second group, right? So these people don't have time to grind the dilithium themselves. If they did, then they could just do the event. So we find a happy, you know, we have to Venn diagram this, right? So you take the players who don't have time to farm their own dilithium and you incentivize them. So then when the event comes around, let's say this summer event, and I don't know what you'd work it out to, let's say it's 6,000 Zen to buy out the event, and then you work that out 6,000 times, 500, whatever. Is that 300,000 or something? 3 million. Did I tell you I have a math degree? And so then you price it that way, and then these people who don't have time to play the game will still pay $60 to buy it out. It's just that you've added another step. So now instead of just buying the Zen and then hitting the buyout button, instead what they'll do is they'll buy the Zen, then they'll go to the exchange and get the dilithium, and then they can hit the buyout button. So you do add one extra step for those folks, but they're still incentivized to pay money because it's about skipping the time investment. And then that will generate interest, a renewed interest on the Dilex. Okay, suggestion number 2 is not my own. So I said I wanted to come up with suggestions that are new and novel. This one is not actually new, but I don't know how many people have seen it, and that comes from Casual SAB, and he used to be SOB. Spencer has a great YouTube channel, big fan of his, and his suggestion was to make it so that you can buy Endeavor points with dilithium. And the reason why I like that is because, again, it takes the time element out of it, right? There is no alternative there. You know, when they added the buyout to the reputations, but the thing about that is getting a reputation to tier 6 only takes about 2 months. So even if you were a brand new player starting right now, or let's say you're an old time player who's fallen behind on Endeavor points, you know, you're not really going to be able to catch up. Whereas you could catch up on reputations in 2 months. So catching up on reputations is absolutely doable. Catching up on Endeavors is not. And so there's no other way to circumvent it. So just you can make the price really high. 50,000 dilithium for 1 Endeavor point or whatever. And the reason you can get away with that and create a really huge dilithium sink is because there is no alternative. There's no competition, right? If that's the only way you can do it, you have a monopoly. And when you have a monopoly, you can raise prices. And that's what they need. They need to add a dilithium sink, which is a monopoly on currency. If you add a dilithium sink that is directly competing with another currency, then you have to lower the price. So we need a dilithium sink, which is the only available way to get that item. So they could add a buyout for Endeavor points, set a really huge dilithium price on that, and just let people buy them out that way. And that's also good for whales, and I realize that I shouldn't be saying that, right? Because I'm against whaling, for sure. I'm absolutely against that kind of monetization. But you know, if we're thinking about solutions that they're actually going to use, right? If we're thinking about trying to figure out a solution that Cryptic will actually listen to, they're never going to implement a solution that doesn't somehow monetize the whales. That's just the reality. No matter what we say, they're not going to, you know, change that. That is their monetization model, and it's not going anywhere. So if you're a whale and you're saying, hey, you know, you can buy out your entire 400 Endeavor points with cash. Some of them are going to do it, right? And I would buy some because I'm a little bit behind. I would farm the dilithium to do it. I wouldn't pay cash, but hey, it's an option to let people get caught up. And in a game that's 11 years old, having a catch-up mechanic like that, I think is not a big deal. The other reason why you need the price to be very high is because you need it to be the case that the people who spent all of their time doing their endeavors every day don't feel devalued by people coming in and buying it out. If the dilithium price per Endeavor point is too cheap, then what ends up happening is that the people who did all the grinding to get 400 Endeavor points are going to feel ripped off. Like, well, I wish I would have waited, then I could have just gotten it for 20 bucks. So the price needs to be high so that value is maintained for the people who put their time in. Anyway, I can see that this is already over 18 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. But just in conclusion, I was never a big fan of the dilithium exchange. I never thought free-to-play players should rely on it. I think there are ways to help the dilithium economy if Cryptic really is serious about getting the exchange rate back down. I don't think they're going to do it, though. And yeah, I would just encourage people who feel deflated by this to just change their mindset, you know? You can't control what you can't control. All you can control is yourself. And if you just simply try to find other ways to enjoy the game that don't involve real money currency, I think you'll find that you can still have a lot of fun. We're getting ready to get another free ship. And if you really feel that you do need real currency to enjoy the game, then I would say, well, maybe you should either buy it and support the game or find a different game. And I don't mean that in a mean way. So that's it. Thank you guys very much for listening or watching. The review videos for the Clark and the Grissom are coming. I am working on them. But until then, I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.